In this video, we will cover events that took place in Wisconsin. On April 13, 2018, 21-year-old Shannon Money was expected to pick up her little brother from school, but she didn't arrive to pick him up, and her phone was switched off. Shannon's parents had absolutely no clue about what they would be dealing with when they reported their daughter missing to the police. Shannon Money was born on April 6, 1997, to Anshu Money and Vijay Money. She was a small child when her parents immigrated from Fiji to the United States. Her family had resided in the town of Waukesha in southeastern Wisconsin. This small and peaceful town was the place where Shannon was raised and attended school. She was intelligent, pretty, and very social. Her parents believed that Waukesha was the ideal place to raise their children. In 2015, Shannon completed her high school education and enrolled at the University of Wisconsin at Milwaukee. She enjoyed working to support people and was interested in working as a social worker. In spite of her demanding schedule, Shannon joined her father in working for an organic food company. One day, while at work, she was introduced to Quentin Neal, 26, who was there to apply for a position. Similar to Shannon, Quentin had a passion for helping people. Shannon dreamt of one day constructing a shelter for women and children, and Quentin also said he wanted to make a shelter for his community. With common interests and perspectives on life, Shannon and Quentin grew close quickly. The friendship between the two developed into a romance. Shannon was delighted to have met Quentin, and before long they began living together. Quentin cared for Shannon, and she in turn made sure that their relationship was a happy one. They were making plans for their future until the day when Shannon disappeared. On April 13, 2018, Shannon didn't go to pick up her little brother from school and didn't come to work. Her phone had been turned off, and she hadn't told anybody that she would be missing her work shift. On the exact same day, her parents headed to the police station after they were unable to figure out on their own where their daughter was. At the beginning, detectives speculated that because of Shannon's young age, she might have simply escaped or gone somewhere with friends. However, her parents dismissed the suggestion because such behavior was unusual for their daughter. She simply wasn't the kind of person who would just switch her phone off and have fun with her friends while her family were worried. Shannon's mother provided investigators with details that led them to take the case much more seriously. At the time she disappeared, Shannon was 4 months pregnant. Women who are pregnant don't typically disappear unless something bad happened to them. Some money, some of her documents, and other valuables were still in Shannon's room, and that was another troubling factor. Shannon's parents informed investigators that the child's father was 27-year-old Quentin Neal. However, when they reached Quentin by phone, he told them he himself had no idea of where their daughter might be. Shannon had recently been living at her parents' house, and Quentin said he hadn't seen her at all that day. The investigators themselves phoned Quentin and requested that he come to the police station because they had questions they wanted some answers for. Quentin appeared anxious and said that he would immediately get to the police station. When he arrived, Shannon's parents were still there. Quentin informed the investigators that the last time he had seen Shannon was over 24 hours ago, when she was leaving his house and planning to pick up her little brother from school. They had only exchanged a few text messages and had not been in contact again since then. When investigators inquired of Quentin where he suspected Shannon might be, he couldn't provide an answer because Shannon's life was concentrated on school and work, and until that day, she had always stayed in touch with her loved ones. However, Quentin remembered that there was another guy who expressed interest in her despite being aware that she was in a relationship and expecting a child. This guy, according to Quentin, never quit pursuing Shannon's affection, even when she asked him to leave her alone. The investigators immediately labeled this guy as a person of possible concern, since jealousy often results in reckless behavior. The next day, police started interviewing Shannon's friends in an effort to uncover new leads. Information about the search for the young pregnant woman was distributed to all police stations in Wisconsin. That same day, the first unsettling revelation was made. Shannon's car was found in Milwaukee, approximately 20 minutes away from her home. Forensic investigators inspected the vehicle thoroughly, inside and out, but found nothing suspicious. It showed no signs of carjacking, a struggle, or any other evidence of a crime. Shannon's purse and her cell phone were not in the car. However, fingerprints belonging to 3 different people were found. One belonged to Shannon, the other to Quentin, but who the other fingerprints belonged to was unknown, and the police had to identify the person who left them. That same afternoon, the guy who was mentioned by Quentin was taken in for questioning. While he said that he was very upset to hear that Shannon was missing, he denied what Quentin said, claiming that he and Shannon were merely friends and that he had never attempted to pursue a romantic relationship with her. When pressed by investigators, he admitted that he had once confessed his love to Shannon, but she told him that they could only be friends. Since then, he hasn't sought to take any steps to gain Shannon's affection. The guy's fingerprints were compared to those in Shannon's car, and they indicated a match. However, he justified this by stating that Shannon frequently gave him rides to the university, and therefore, it was no surprise that his fingerprints were found in her car. He also said that when Shannon went missing, he was 100 miles away from Waukesha, attending a baseball game. The investigators checked his alibi, and when it was confirmed, they ruled him out as a potential suspect. The investigators soon received a surprising and very crucial lead in this case. Anshu Mani found her daughter's Apple Watch and managed to look at some of Shannon's text messages, then decided to visit the police station again. She turned the watch over to investigators for examination. When the investigators started reviewing Shannon's most recent text messages, they uncovered some very interesting information. Quentin claimed that he had not met Shannon on the day of her disappearance, but these text messages proved the opposite. On the day Shannon went missing, the two of them were texting each other and agreed to meet up. That means Quentin was lying to the investigators and to her parents, and this new piece of information made Quentin the prime suspect in the case. While continuing to look through the messages in Shannon's watch, the investigators found that not everything was perfect in her relationship with Quentin. There were messages that proved Quentin had been abusive towards the mother of their unborn child. This kind of treatment from her lover came as a shock to Shannon. Quentin apologized for his behavior and pleaded with her not to leave him. Shannon suggested that they should take a break from their relationship. All of this information, as well as the fact that Quentin had a criminal record, led the investigators to suspect that he was not a good guy. Quentin had been on parole from prison, in which he had been held after committing a robbery. He has been arrested multiple times for assault and misdemeanor offenses. According to Shannon's parents, they had been mistrustful of Quentin lately, as they saw that their daughter was almost always in a depressed mood. Quentin was emotionally unstable when it came to the baby Shannon was expecting. After Shannon notified her parents that she got pregnant, they met with Quentin, and he pledged that he would look after both Shannon and the baby, claiming that he had long wanted to have children of his own and things like that. However, according to Anshu Mani, a few days after that conversation took place, Quentin texted her some strange messages saying that he was wrong and that he didn't want this baby. He wrote that it would be better if Shannon had an abortion. Police tried to track Shannon's cell phone and learned it was last active on the afternoon of April 13th in the area where Quentin lives. Shannon's mother noticed the severe bruising on her arms one day and asked how it had come about. Shannon started crying and explained that she had been beaten by Quentin. He had gotten into her vehicle and began beating her with his fists. Even though her parents requested that their daughter break off her relationship with Quentin, Shannon eventually forgave him and went back to dating him. Equipped with all this information, investigators grew anxious that they would not find Shannon alive. They promptly requested a search warrant and headed to Quentin's house. At first glance, the place did not appear to have any evidence to suggest that it was a crime scene. It was clean, and there were no signs of a struggle or broken furniture and objects. Forensics sprayed the first floor with luminol and found nothing. However, when they went down to the basement and sprayed luminol there, the walls and floor glowed. There were marks all over the place, which made it clear that Shannon was most likely no longer alive. Quentin Neal was arrested and taken to the police station. Before starting to interrogate him, the investigators examined the contents of his phone and discovered that he had been searching for lie on the internet. He was apparently planning to hide evidence of the crime by using this chemical. During the questioning, Quentin kept claiming that he didn't know where Shannon might be and that he had no connection to her disappearance. However, this time the investigators had solid evidence, and Quentin started to alter his testimony. Eventually, he said he was willing to confess to everything. According to him, he had indeed taken Shannon's life, but what really surprised the investigators was that he said he had been acting in self-defense. He stated that Shannon arrived at his house that day to discuss their future and their child. They began to argue, and that's when, according to Quentin, Shannon walked into the kitchen and took a knife and a gun that had been kept there for emergencies. Shannon began to threaten him, and that's when he thought he needed to act fast. A struggle broke out between them, and Shannon ultimately ended up dead. Quentin proceeded to emphasize to the investigators that he was acting in self-defense. The investigators weren't really believing his story because he didn't have any defensive wounds on his body, but they still continued to listen to him. According to Quentin, when he recognized that he had done something that could not be undone, he panicked. In the basement of his house, where everything happened, he stored a large suitcase, which he used to try to hide the evidence of the crime. Quentin Neal brought the police to a storage unit about 6 miles from his residence. That's where he had hidden the suitcase. Detectives discovered Shannon's lifeless body there. Her wrists and ankles were tied with duct tape, making Quentin's story of self-defense even more absurd. Forensic experts determined that Shannon died from 2 bullet wounds to the head. In addition, there were wounds on her body caused by a knife. Shannon's parents' worst nightmare came true when detectives informed them of the discovery of their daughter's body. On April 18, 2018, Quentin Neal was indicted for taking the lives of Shannon Money and her unborn son. There was sufficient evidence gathered for the court to reach a guilty verdict. Based on their correspondence, on the day of her passing, Shannon had gone to Quentin's home to discuss her pregnancy. They began to argue, and Shannon never managed to come out of Neal's house again. The trial was supposed to start in the spring of 2019, but a few days beforehand, attorneys and court officials received anonymous letters that caused the trial to be delayed for 3 months. The letters claimed that someone other than Quentin Neal was responsible for Shannon's death, but a judge later ruled that the letters were not relevant after the author of the letters was identified, since one of Quentin's friends wrote the letters to try to help him and confuse the investigation, but that attempt was unsuccessful. Quentin Neal was facing capital punishment. He denied the charges brought against him and maintained that he had been acting in self-defense. 15 months had elapsed since Shannon's death. Her family hoped for justice and tried to remain positive. Shannon's mother, Anshu, tried hard to keep positive memories alive. "Be positive and don't lose hope," said Anshu Mani. "We had planned that maybe in our lifetime we will build a shelter home." Then Shannon was into supporting against domestic violence and supporting women and children. Before that dream could become reality, Shannon Mani became a victim herself. On July 15, 2019, it was revealed that Quentin Neal had reached a plea deal with the investigation. He admitted his guilt in depriving Shannon and her child of their lives. According to the terms of the deal, the prosecutors dropped their efforts to seek the death penalty for him. On July 17, 2019, 28-year-old Quentin Neal was sentenced by the Milwaukee County Circuit Court to 2 concurrent life sentences. He will have no eligibility for parole and thus will spend the rest of his life in prison. At his sentencing, Neal remained silent, never answering why he committed the crime. "Justice is served. The only thing we're happy about is that he won't be able to hurt anyone else," Shannon's mother, Anshu Mani, said. Shannon's parents want to prevent future tragedies like this one. "We couldn't save her, but there's many other Shannons that we can help. And if I'm able to help one Shannon in my lifetime, it will be a blessing." Shannon dreamed of opening a shelter for women and children. According to her parents, they planned to keep this dream alive and open a shelter in her memory.